We're embarrassed to have such a poor relation at our family celebration. My name's Robert. I'm 59 years old, and I just heard my daughter's future mother-in-law say those words about me. We stood in the grand ballroom of the Wellington Estate in Charleston, South Carolina, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and people who measured worth by the thread count of their suits. I wore my best navy jacket, the same one I'd owned for 8 years, and apparently that made me an embarrassment. Patricia Wellington adjusted her diamond necklace and whispered loud enough for half the room to hear. Her husband nodded along, checking his gold watch like my presence was costing them time. Their son Trevor stood beside them, saying nothing. My daughter Isabella held my arm tighter. I'd raised Isabella alone since she was 3 months old. Her mother left us with nothing but a note saying motherhood wasn't for her. 24 years later, Isabella grew into the kind of woman who could light up any room. Smart, kind, and stubborn as hell when it came to doing the right thing. She worked as a teacher in Jacksonville, lived modestly, and never asked for handouts. Everything about her made me proud. The Wellingtons owned a manufacturing company that made industrial equipment. They lived in a mansion with 14 rooms, drove cars that cost more than most people's houses, and belonged to country clubs with waiting lists longer than my grocery receipts. They threw this engagement party to show off their wealth, and I was clearly not part of their vision. "Dad," Isabella whispered, "we don't have to stay." I squeezed her hand. "I'm here for you, sweetheart. That's all that matters." But something about Patricia's smile bothered me. She looked at me like I was a stray dog someone had brought to dinner. Her husband Gerald kept glancing at my worn shoes and second-hand watch. They whispered to each other behind champagne flutes, and I caught fragments. Single father. Teacher's salary. What will people think? An older woman approached us, introducing herself as Patricia's sister. She looked me up and down before asking, "So, Robert, what do you do for work?" "I manage investments," I said. She laughed. "Oh, like a financial advisor at one of those strip mall places?" Isabella's grip tightened on my arm. I saw her jaw clench the same way it did when her students misbehaved. The room felt smaller suddenly, filled with people who'd already decided who I was based on my jacket and my address. But they had no idea what they were really looking at. None of them knew that the modest man they were mocking had been keeping their family empire afloat for the past 5 years. Isabella never knew about the money until she turned 18. I'd built my wealth quietly, starting with a small inheritance from my grandfather, and turning it into something substantial through careful investments and a few lucky breaks in the early tech boom. By the time Isabella graduated high school, I had more money than the Wellingtons could spend in 3 lifetimes. But I never wanted wealth to define us. Isabella grew up in a 3-bedroom house in Jacksonville, learned to budget her allowance, and worked summers to pay for her car insurance. I taught her that character mattered more than bank accounts, that respect was earned through actions, not possessions. She internalized those lessons so well that even after learning about my financial situation, she chose to live on her teacher's salary and save my money for emergencies. The Wellington family's manufacturing company, Creswell Industries, had been struggling when I first invested 5 years ago. Gerald Wellington had inherited the business from his father, but he'd expanded too quickly and made some questionable decisions about overseas production. By the time I quietly purchased a controlling stake through shell companies, Creswell Industries was 6 months away from bankruptcy. I never revealed myself as the investor. My lawyers structured the deals through holding companies with names like Northern Capital and Strathmore Investments. Gerald received the funding he needed, restructured his operations, and started turning profits within 18 months. He attributed the company's turnaround to his own business acumen, never knowing that his anonymous benefactor was eating dinner 20 minutes away in a modest kitchen. The warning signs started small. When Isabella first introduced Trevor, Patricia made comments about Isabella's simple engagement ring and suggested they upgrade to something more appropriate for the Wellington family image. During dinners, Gerald would pontificate about people who don't understand business while describing his company's success. Patricia organized charity events and social gatherings, always emphasizing how important it was to maintain proper appearances. Isabella came home from several family dinners looking frustrated. They keep making comments about our house, she told me one evening. Patricia asked if I was embarrassed to bring Trevor there. I'd noticed Trevor's behavior shifting too. Early in their relationship, he seemed genuine and down to earth, but after spending more time with his parents, he started making subtle suggestions about Isabella's wardrobe choices and questioning whether she really wanted to keep teaching after they married. Last month, Gerald had bragged to Isabella about landing a major contract worth $12 million. He didn't mention that his company only qualified for that contract because of the financial stability my investment had provided. Patricia scheduled today's engagement party at their country club, sent invitations to Charleston's finest families, and made it clear that appearances mattered more than anything else. Standing in their ballroom now, watching them treat me like an inconvenience, I realized they'd learned nothing about humility, despite everything I'd quietly done to secure their comfortable lives. The nameplate sat on the gift table like a slap in the face. Burden of the bride. Isabella saw it first. Her face went completely still, the way it did when she was processing something that cut deep. She walked over, picked up the small golden placard, and read it aloud in a voice that carried across the room. Burden of the bride. The conversation stopped. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Patricia Wellington's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered, raising her chin like she was proud of the cruel joke. "It's just a bit of fun," Patricia said with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "We thought it was clever." Gerald chuckled beside his wife. "Come on, Robert, you have to admit it's funny. Single fathers walking their daughters down the aisle. It's always a bit awkward, isn't it?" Trevor said nothing. He stood beside his parents, looking uncomfortable but not speaking up to defend either Isabella or me. That told me everything I needed to know about the man my daughter planned to marry. Isabella set the nameplate down carefully. She looked at Trevor, waiting for him to say something, to show some backbone, to choose her over his parents' cruelty. When he remained silent, she turned to me. "Dad, let's go. This is over." Her words were quiet but absolute. She meant more than just leaving the party. I could see it in her eyes. She was done with all of it. The engagement, the family, the pretense that these people deserved her respect. We walked out together, Isabella holding her head high while whispers followed us across the marble floor. In the car, she cried for the first time since she was 12 and broke her arm falling off her bike. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry they treated you like that." I pulled over and held my daughter while she sobbed. Not because they'd hurt her feelings, but because she'd finally seen what kind of people she was planning to marry into. The cruelty wasn't just directed at me. It was a preview of how they'd treat her for the rest of her life. Driving home, I made a decision. I thought about Gerald's proud speeches regarding his company's success, Patricia's charity events funded by profits from my investment, and their assumption that I was beneath them. They'd built their comfortable lives on my money while treating me like garbage. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. "James, it's Robert. I need you to prepare withdrawal papers for all my investments in Creswell Industries. I want to be completely divested by market close tomorrow." "That's $52 million, Robert. Are you sure?" I looked at Isabella, who was staring out the window with determination replacing her tears. "I'm sure. Some lessons cost more than others." The phone rang at 7:30 the next morning. I was making coffee in my kitchen when Isabella answered, still in her pajamas from the night before. She'd stayed over after the disaster at the engagement party, needing space to think about her relationship with Trevor. "Hello, Trevor." Her voice was flat, emotionless. She listened for a moment, then held the phone away from her ear. "Dad, he wants to talk to you." I took the phone. Trevor's voice was frantic, higher pitched than usual. "Mr. Henderson, I need to apologize for my parents. They went too far last night. The nameplate thing was Patricia's idea, and I should have stopped it. Please don't let this affect Isabella's relationship with our family." "Your relationship with Isabella is between you two," I said. "But I won't pretend last night didn't happen. I understand you're upset. Maybe we could all sit down and work this out. Patricia feels terrible about the misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. Like calling me a burden was some kind of communication error. There's nothing to work out, Trevor. Your parents showed me exactly who they are. He was quiet for a moment, then, look, I know you probably think we have everything figured out because of Dad's business success, but things are more complicated than they appear. We could really use your support as Isabella's father. Something in his tone caught my attention. Desperation, maybe, or fear. What kind of complications? Just family business stuff. Dad's been stressed about some investor relations recently. Having Isabella's family fully on board would mean a lot right now. I almost laughed. Trevor was trying to manipulate me into forgiving his parents because they needed stability for their business. The same business that existed because of my money. After I hung up, Isabella sat across from me at the kitchen table. He doesn't get it, does he? No, he doesn't. Dad, I need to tell you something. Last month, Patricia took me shopping for wedding dresses. The whole time she kept making comments about how I needed to elevate my standards now that I was joining their family. She said I dressed like someone who didn't understand quality. Isabella stirred her coffee slowly. Then she told me that Trevor deserved better than a public school teacher, but they'd accepted me because I seemed trainable. Those were her exact words. The anger I'd been holding back since last night started building pressure behind my chest. Patricia Wellington had spent months systematically tearing down my daughter's confidence while living off my investment returns. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just proved myself worthy, they'd eventually respect me. She looked up with tears in her eyes. But nothing I did was ever going to be good enough, was it? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Patricia Wellington. We need to talk. It's urgent regarding the family business. I showed Isabella the message. She shook her head. They still don't understand what they've lost, she said. They think this is about hurt feelings that can be smoothed over with the right conversation. I called my lawyer James while Isabella got dressed. The withdrawal papers are ready, James said. Creswell Industries will receive notification this afternoon that their primary investor is divesting completely. They'll have 48 hours to arrange alternative financing or face immediate liquidity issues. How bad will it get? Catastrophic. Without your investment, their quarterly loan payments will exceed their liquid assets by Tuesday. Gerald Wellington leveraged everything assuming your money would continue flowing indefinitely. Isabella came downstairs wearing jeans and a sweater, clothes Patricia would have criticized as too casual for a Wellington family member. Dad, whatever you're planning, I'm with you. I looked at my daughter, 24 years old and strong enough to walk away from a future that would have slowly destroyed her spirit. Patricia Wellington is about to learn the difference between earned success and borrowed time. The investigation took 3 hours. I had my accountant pull every document related to my investments in Creswell Industries, and what we discovered was worse than I'd imagined. Gerald Wellington hadn't just been living off my money, he'd been actively lying about the source of his company's turnaround. According to the quarterly reports he'd submitted to industry publications, Creswell Industries had recovered from near bankruptcy through innovative management strategies and market-driven restructuring. He'd given interviews to business magazines taking full credit for the company's dramatic improvement. The reality was simple. Without my $52 million, Creswell Industries would have folded in 2019. Every success story Gerald told, every contract he bragged about, every expansion project he'd funded, all of it existed because I'd quietly kept his company alive. More damning was what my lawyer discovered in the corporate filings. Gerald had used my investment as collateral for additional loans, borrowing against money that was never truly his. He'd purchased the mansion, the luxury cars, and Patricia's jewelry using credit lines secured by my anonymous capital injection. He's built a house of cards, James explained over the phone. Your withdrawal doesn't just remove his primary funding source. It invalidates the collateral backing his other financial obligations. Isabella sat beside me, reading through the documents. They borrowed money to buy the things they used to mock us? It gets worse, I said, pointing to another section. Look at Patricia's charity work. The Wellington Family Foundation had been making substantial donations to various causes around Charleston. Patricia served on boards, organized fundraisers, and had recently been featured in Charleston Magazine as Philanthropist of the Year. Every dollar she donated came from profits generated by my investment in Gerald's company. Isabella's phone rang. Trevor's name appeared on the screen. "Answer it," I told her. "Let's see how desperate they're getting." She put the call on speaker. Trevor's voice was strained, barely controlled. "Isabella, we need to talk. Something's happening with Dad's business and he thinks you might be able to help us understand what's going on." "What kind of help?" "Well, your father mentioned he manages investments, right? Maybe he knows someone who could advise us. We've got this situation where our primary investor just pulled out without warning. Dad's trying not to panic, but it's pretty serious." Isabella looked at me with raised eyebrows. They still had no idea. "What makes you think my dad would know anyone who could help?" "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot last night. Patricia realizes she made some mistakes. She's willing to apologize properly if we can just get past this family drama and focus on the bigger picture." The bigger picture. Like my daughter's humiliation was a minor inconvenience compared to their financial crisis. "Trevor," Isabella said, "exactly how much money are we talking about?" "Around 50 million. I know it sounds like a lot, but Dad says investors pull out all the time for random reasons. We just need to find the right person to talk to them, maybe negotiate some kind of arrangement." Isabella muted the phone. "Dad, they have no clue it was you." I took the phone and unmuted it. "Trevor, this is Robert. Let me ask you something. Did your father ever tell you who his anonymous investor was?" "No, he said it was some private equity firm that preferred to stay out of the spotlight. Northern Capital or something like that." "Why?" I smiled at Isabella. "No reason. Just curious about how these things work." After Trevor hung up, Isabella shook her head. They're about to learn that the burden they mocked yesterday was holding up their entire world. Patricia called me directly at 4:15 that afternoon. I let it ring twice before answering. "Robert, thank God. We need your help." I leaned back in my office chair, looking out at the modest Jacksonville neighborhood where I'd raised Isabella. "Help with what, Patricia?" "Our family business is facing a crisis. Gerald's primary investor withdrew their funding this morning with no explanation. We're talking about $52 million just gone." "I'm sorry to hear that. The thing is, Isabella mentioned you work in investment management. I know we didn't get off to the best start last night, but this is bigger than personal feelings. Do you know anyone who might be interested in acquiring a stake in a successful manufacturing company?" The irony was so perfect I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. "What kind of company?" "Creswell Industries. We make industrial equipment, primarily for construction and mining operations. Gerald turned the company around 5 years ago after some difficult periods. We've been extremely profitable since then." "Turned it around how?" Patricia's voice brightened, thinking she had my attention. "Oh, Gerald is brilliant with business strategy. He restructured the entire operation, negotiated better supplier relationships, expanded our market presence. The company's valuation has increased by 400% since the turnaround began." Every word was a lie built on my money. "That's impressive. Who was the investor that pulled out?" "Some private firm called Northern Capital. They never even sent representatives to our board meetings, just wired money and collected their returns. Gerald thinks they might have been acquired by a larger company that's consolidating their portfolio. Northern Capital was one of my shell companies." Patricia was describing my investment strategy without knowing she was talking to me. "Patricia, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Last night you called me a burden. You made a nameplate to humiliate me at your son's engagement party. Why would you think I'd want to help your family now?" The line went quiet for a long moment. When Patricia spoke again, her voice was smaller. "Robert, that was a mistake. I was trying to be funny, and it came out wrong. I realize now how hurtful that must have been. It wasn't just hurtful. It was cruel. You treated me like garbage in front of my daughter." "You're right, I was completely wrong. Gerald and I both were. We're prepared to make amends, publicly if necessary. We could host another engagement party, a proper one where you're treated with the respect you deserve." I thought about Isabella, who'd spent the day cleaning out Trevor's belongings from her apartment. She'd decided this morning that she couldn't marry into a family that would treat her father with such contempt. Patricia, what if I told you that your anonymous investor didn't just randomly pull out? What if they withdrew their funding because of how your family behaved last night? Another long silence. That's not possible. They don't know us personally. It's just business. Are you sure about that? Robert, what are you saying? I looked at the withdrawal papers James had prepared, already filed and processed. The money that had kept Creswell Industries afloat for 5 years was gone, transferred back to accounts bearing my name. I'm saying that sometimes the people you look down on turn out to be more important than you realized. Patricia's breathing changed on the other end of the line. Robert, are you saying you know who Northern Capital is? Patricia, I said gently, I am Northern Capital. The phone went dead silent. Then I heard what sounded like crying. Patricia's voice cracked like breaking ice. That's not possible. James Morrison from Morrison and Associates handled the paperwork. Would you like me to have him explain the corporate structure? Northern Capital, Strathmore Investments, Meridian Holdings, all registered to Robert Henderson of Jacksonville, Florida. I heard Gerald's voice in the background, asking Patricia who was on the phone. She must have put me on speaker because his voice became clearer. Who is this? Gerald, this is Robert Henderson, Isabella's father, the burden you mocked at your son's engagement party. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Then Gerald's voice, barely a whisper. You're the anonymous investor. Was, past tense. As of this morning, I own 0% of Creswell Industries. Your company now has 47 hours to secure alternative financing for your quarterly loan obligations, or your creditors will begin seizure proceedings. Patricia started crying harder. We didn't know, we had no idea. That's the point, Patricia. You judged me based on my jacket and my address. You decided I was beneath your family's standards without knowing anything about who I actually was. Gerald found his voice. Robert, please. We can fix this. We'll apologize publicly. We'll do whatever you want. What I wanted was for you to treat my daughter and me with basic human decency. Instead, you made her feel ashamed of her family. We'll make it right. Name your price. I looked across my kitchen table at Isabella, who was listening to every word. She gave me a small nod. There is no price, Gerald. You can't buy back respect once you've thrown it away. Patricia's voice was desperate now. The company employs 200 people. They'll lose their jobs. Then you should have thought about that before you decided humiliating your son's future father-in-law was worth a laugh. Gerald tried one more time. We'll give you anything. Controlling interest in the company, board positions, public recognition for your investment. I don't want your company, Gerald. I never did. I invested to help a struggling business, and you used that money to build a lifestyle that allowed you to look down on people like me. Isabella reached for the phone. Patricia, this is Isabella. Your son lost the best thing that ever happened to him because you taught him that cruelty was acceptable. I hope the nameplate was worth $52 million. I hung up the phone and looked at my daughter. How do you feel? She smiled for the first time since the engagement party. Like I just dodged the worst mistake of my life. Patricia Wellington and her family faced complete financial ruin when Creswell Industries filed for bankruptcy within 72 hours of my withdrawal. Gerald lost his position as company president when the board discovered his wife's treatment of their largest investor had triggered the business collapse. Their mansion went into foreclosure, their luxury cars were repossessed, and their country club memberships were canceled when they could no longer afford the dues. The story spread quickly through Charleston's social circles. Patricia became a cautionary tale about the consequences of judging people by appearances when word got out that she had insulted and driven away the anonymous benefactor who had been funding their entire lifestyle. The Wellington Family Foundation dissolved when investigations revealed that all their charitable donations had come from profits generated by my investment returns. Patricia found herself unemployable in the nonprofit sector, where donors were valued and protected above all else. Trevor moved back in with his parents in a small rental house outside Charleston. He tried calling Isabella several times, but she'd changed her number and moved on with her life. Gerald took a job as a regional sales manager for a competitor, earning a fraction of his former salary and working for people who knew exactly how his previous company had collapsed. 6 months later, Isabella and I took a vacation to Ireland, something we'd always talked about but never done. We spent 2 weeks driving through small villages, staying in bed and breakfast and talking about her plans to get her master's degree in education. She was dating a fellow teacher now, a man who valued her intelligence and treated her with the respect she deserved. Standing on the cliffs of Moher, watching the Atlantic Ocean stretch toward the horizon, I realized that sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that teach us what really matters. The Wellingtons had learned that money built on someone else's generosity can disappear as quickly as it came. But the love between a father and daughter is something no one can take away.